Hello and welcome to GHHU 2901 Online Research for College Students. This is our fourth lecture, and this week we're going to talk about Internet information sources. So we're going to talk a little bit about the information timeline, what gets published when, as well as take a deeper dive into Google and Wikipedia, as well as Google Scholar. My hope is that this is one of those lessons that will stick with you even after you graduate. Just because you may not have the supports of like an academic library when you go out and enter the workforce. So this lesson should give you kind of the basics for what you would need to know as an informed citizen and contributing to that whole lifelong learning thing. But before we get too far, welcome to week 4. In week 3, we talked about research questions. We talked about how they should be complex and multifaceted, right? You shouldn't be able to answer a good research question in just a yes or a no. You really need to write about what you care about. Nobody wants to read that 10-page paper you were forced to write and you didn't enjoy writing. I'm willing to bet on just about any topic there's something, if you think hard enough, that would interest you. There's some angle that you can work. We talked about Boolean logic using and or not, as well as phrase searches and wildcards, and how to really effectively construct some of these search terms, as well as spiders and robots and crawling the web and why we need to use these things like Boolean logic and phrase searching. Today we're going to build a little bit more on Boolean logic and phrase searching and show you this in actual practice. Uh, so let's get to it. Here's some data, and it is quite honestly a little old. It is from 2010 and 2009. Really needs to update. But what I want to show you in this graph is that where people go for everyday life research is different than where they go for academic research. So, for example, let's just say you need new tires. This has happened to me before, where I need new tires and I am not a tire salesman. I don't know everything about tires. When I go to get an oil change, they tell me my tire life is at a 5 and it's time to start thinking about it. And then I start, trying to think about what kind of tires I need. When I need tires, usually the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to search Google. And I'm going to put good tires and I'm going to find consumer reports. And then I'm going to look and see, is this tire better than this tire? Things like that. And then maybe I find a tire that I like. Let's just say I want a Goodyear tire. Then, quite honestly, I often go to Wikipedia and I look up the company just to make sure, there's nothing immediately wrong with the company from which I'm about to do business. I might go and ask friends and family, hey, have any of you bought tires recently? How do you like them? Personal collection doesn't quite work for tires per se, but everyone has some books at home. Lots of people go and they pull some books from their shelf. They'll look up information. And then government websites, right? Because, you might want to look up the safety rating for those tires. You might want to hear from the government. Have they tested these tires? Are they good? Are there unusually high or low accidents associated with those tires? So, what I'm trying to get at here is that there's an ecosystem, which we all do, right? And whenever you have an information need, you need a tire, you need a computer, you're just curious about something you read online, you're going to go to Google. 95 or 99% of people, they're going to search engines, including Google. And then starts to whittle down a little bit. And then they go to Wikipedia, they go to friends, they go to government websites. And truth be told, the library is all the way down here. Mainly because people don't come to the library to ask about tires. However, library is still not much higher here, but this is course research. So I'm going to flip back and forth just so you can see this. This is everyday life research. You see Google's right at the top, Wikipedia comes in second, and Friends come in third. This is for when you need tires or you need a computer or anything like that. And this is course-related research. This is when your professor says, I need you to write me a paper. First place everyone looks is their course readings. I do this too. Whenever I'm in a class and I have to write a paper or I have to write a brief or I have to do any of that, you bet I'm going to cite the textbook. The professor assigned the textbook for a reason. There's probably something in the textbook that I can relate to what I'm needing to write about, and I'm going to show them that I read the book. But I'm also going to go to Google. Truth be told, I find a lot of sources I use in a paper through Google. And then you know what else I'm going to do? I'm going to go to the library website and I'm going to look up some databases. I'm going to look in some databases for some articles. Unless I'm stuck, I'm not really going to ask my instructor, but apparently many people do. I do routinely go to Wikipedia. And we're going to talk a little bit more about this, about the right way to use Wikipedia for course-related research. But no, it is entirely normal to look at Wikipedia for course-related research. I do it, you do it. I promise you, when building the class, your instructor looked at Wikipedia. And then government collections, classmates, all of those. So there's a difference, right, between what you do for your personal life and what you do for your class. More often than not, in your personal life, you're using Google and you're using Wikipedia and you're asking some friends. So the point of the lesson today is to teach you how to use Google most effectively for your life, as well as for some of these academic research topics. So, a couple things we need to know before we go out on the internet, because the internet can be a scary place. Not everything can be found on the open internet. Some file types are blocked, right? Because some things are malicious, can cause giant issues for your computer. Other things, companies don't want that particular file blocked or that particular file available. So, you can block certain file types, or rather, Google can. Some websites are dynamically created. So, for example, let's just say I use iCal as my calendar, and I want to look up my calendar for 2052 on August 22nd. I want to know what day of the week that is. I promise you, iCal does not have that page just sitting there. It's going to create that page when I'm asking it to. So not everything on the internet is even created right now, but it will be when it's needed. Copyright is a huge deal. We all have seen these things on Google where it says at the bottom, this was removed because of DMCA notice. That's because it violated copyright, and Google needed to remove the link to the source. So copyright is one reason why not everything is available on the internet. Cybersecurity, we talked about this a little bit with file types. Not all the information is available on the internet. So for example, if you're running a large, robust organization and you have some very particular cybersecurity policies, you're not going to put that on the public internet. You shouldn't, right? Because that would tell people how to attack you. So they're going to stay behind a paywall or an intranet, something that Google isn't getting its hands into. Important thing, because so many people believe Google just contains everything. It actually only contains about 4% of all the websites. That should tell you how absolutely massive the internet is. If Google only has 4% of websites in their index, just imagine what else is out there. And some of the other stuff is good, and some of the other stuff is bad. But just know that Google does not contain the sum of human knowledge. It only contains, I'm willing to bet it might have gotten up to 5% now, but doesn't contain everything. Here's something that we should also be aware of. When you're looking at websites and you notice like .com or .net or .jp or .org, each one of these little prefixes at the end means something different. .com could be commercial or communications, depending on who you hear this from. Net could be network. JP is Japan. Org is a non-commercial. CN is China. RU, there's different country codes here. And what this means is that if you look at a site and it ends in .co.uk, that would mean it was just running through a United Kingdom server. Same thing if it's a .cn or .ru. Odds are the organization is going to be based in one of those countries. This can have some implications for how much do you trust a website. It could also have some those implications for how much you trust a website could be good or bad, right? For instance, if you look at a .com or a .net, most likely that's a US-based website. If you look up a news article, and I really would encourage you to do this, look at a news article from MSNBC, Fox, CNN, and then look at a news article from the UK on the same topic relating to the US, and just see the difference. See the tonal difference between the two. Same thing with .de for Germany, Deutschland. Fun fact, if you use Google Chrome, you can have it automatically translate the website for you. And I'm willing to bet you'll notice tone differences between the two. And that makes sense, because one's writing for a domestic audience in the US, and one would be writing for an international audience, or a non-domestic audience, right? They're probably writing for people who would speak German or people who live in the UK. So it's super interesting to look at that. I like to do that if I'm actually researching something super contentious. I like to look at international sources because I want to see how people who have less at stake are reporting it. So it is worth pointing out. One thing to know: this is becoming dated information. So .com, .net, we didn't talk about .edu. Those are older prefixes. Most websites still use these. But if you notice, some websites are using things like GroupMe, right? You have group.me. It's a chat-based app that my class uses for doctorate school. The URL, when I go to type it in, is group.me. And that's not here, and that's not a country code. There was a more recent change where they're allowing different organizations to make different domains. So you can't always trust the domain information, but it's still a good tipping point for you. It's a good place to start. Worth also mentioning is .edu. So here's the thing. You've noticed that highlands.edu is the web address. A .edu web address is a special kind of web address. I can't go and register a .edu address. Someone off the street cannot. You have to be an educational institution of higher ed to get a .edu address. So you can be sure that if you're looking at a website with .edu, it's a university, it's a college, it's a technical school. It has some fair, reasoned rationale for being a post-secondary educational institution. That's going to be important because when we get to Google, I'm going to show you some things. But just keep in mind, domains exist. There's different kinds. .edu is a little bit of a special one. So here is something very interesting. Let's just say, for example, an event happens. And I'm not really going to go too far in. Well, okay, let's talk about January 6th. January 6th is a really good example to talk about the information timeline. So, January 6th, people broke into the Capitol building, did some vandalism, things like that. As this was happening, we were getting reports of it on social media. right? You could have live streamed this thing if you wanted to from the ground. Within days, and really truly within minutes at this point, you were seeing news pop up on CNN, on Fox News, BBC, New York Times. You were seeing this information and what happened become more and more present on these news websites. Sure, they did the breaking news, and the breaking news was very much this is happening. And then there's a big disclaimer in there. This may not, factually be true. This is what we're hearing as reported by. Once you give it a day or two, those little prefixes go away because the news sites have verified that information. So it gets to be slightly more credible as you move from the social media live streamed event to the news sites, the TV, the radio. As you get a little bit more time, and actually this is starting to kind of go away, you start to see magazines publishing these kinds of things. You see it in Time, you see it in Newsweek, People, The New Yorker. These kind of older, more established magazines have a crack at it. And they start to kind of look at what happened, and then they start to add more context. They're adding more interviews. They're going a little bit more in depth. 60 Minutes might be a good example as a weekly news magazine TV show, right? It's on once a week. They have enough time to think about what happened, develop some context, do the interviews, schedule everything. Within about a month, you start to see monthly magazines coming out. You start to see Wired, Scientific American, National Geographic. You start to see some of these even more credible organizations, less news related and more culture and society related. This time again allows for better news reporting. It allows for people to formulate informed opinions. You get more and more in-depth information. Scholarly journals then come 3 to 6 months later. This is where you get things that are written by honest to goodness experts who have gone out and conducted really good primary research. They are objective. They spend time writing these articles. They go through a peer review process. Other people review them and issue comments and say, this is good, but did you think about this? That usually is a really high bar, and that's usually what we like to see most in academic writing. Come about a year later, you start to see books. And keep in mind, books are like these 100-page, 200, 300, 400-page things. They're benefiting from hindsight. So they're not on the ground live streaming it. They're looking back a year and they're saying, okay, this happened, this happened, this happened. Here's what this means. And they're giving you a ton of in-depth information. So books are really one of the more credible things, depending on who wrote it. Scholarly articles have that peer-reviewed thing. They also benefit from some of this hindsight. And then these three right here are starting to get kind of squished in together as time changes and we start to become a more rapidly information producing society. So I would actually loop all three of these into can be credible, might not be, needs a little bit more research, needs to be verified by these scholarly journals and the books. And social media is on the story, breaking the news, may be entirely false, likely has some bias. Keep in mind what you're viewing is not very complete. And, it's one of those things to know that this is happening, but to understand that you do not have the full context of what's happening right in that moment. So, let's talk about Google. Google is truly a fantastic source. I don't know where we would be as a society without Google. Google has changed the world. I carry a phone with me. I can put something into Google or any search engine and likely get a ton of sources on whatever topic I want. They might be good, they might be bad, but I'm definitely going to get lots of sources. Google has some tricks that many people do not know about. And we're going to go over some of those in a minute. But as we do this, I want you to keep in mind Google Scholar also exists. Google Scholar is like a whole special section of Google for scholarly articles. You can use Google Scholar to look up stuff for your classes. It will likely have lots of these sources for you. It's not going to have everything the library has. Like, we go out and we license these things especially for you, knowing that, what you're learning in your class. We go and we say, this is a good source, so we go out and license it. But if you're in a pinch, or you don't have a library card, or you're not affiliated with the library, or your account doesn't work, Google Scholar works too. So, let me show you Google real quick. Okay, here's Google. How many of you have seen this page? I actually think it's one of those more very interesting design pages because it's very plain and it has a big search box. These are not actually my searches, by the way. These just pop up. I do know how to boil eggs. Just throwing that out there. Remember we talked about phrase searching? And I told you you can use quotation marks. I put information literacy in quotes because that's a phrase. I use Google, quite honestly, as a spell checker more than anything else. Click that. Here's the result page for information literacy. Handful of things. One, these results from Google can be different from person to person. Google bases every single search you run and the results that come back on what you have previously searched. So Google knows I'm interested in information literacy. It knows I do this search a lot. When you put this in, it might be different. Page 1 might not be very different, but I'm willing to bet if you looked at like page 5, it would be different. So I can tell you for a fact, I have spent time looking at Linda and their information literacy videos. I have spent time looking at ACT. I have spent time on Elsevier. So you should just keep that in mind, that what I see on Google might be different from what you see on Google. We also have Wikipedia right here, which again we're going to talk about. But if you notice, I get a .org, a .edu, Wikipedia, a .com, but this is a little bit of a misnomer, and then more EDUs. I then get ALA, which is pretty nice. That is the Library Professional Organization. I get Bartow County right here. So here's a question. If I were in Sioux City, Iowa, do you think I would get, Barrow, do you think I would get a link to information literacy from a K-12 Georgia institution? Probably not, right? So it's changing based on where I'm located. So Google has information literacy. Here's the thing. So we did and or not, right? For Google, all I do is put a minus there. And primary would be a bad word to put in if I wanted to exclude primary schools. Why? Because information literacy might talk about primary schools or primary sources. Why is that not? There we are. Okay. But I could, in Google, I could do not, and then put the minus, and then K-12. And now it's going to exclude anything that refers to K-12, because I'm only talking about college. Want to point out here, Google does have an advanced search, so you don't have to memorize all of this. They always change these on me. It's under settings, and then advanced search. This is super geeky, but totally worth knowing. So if you go in here and you type all of these words, and you just typed in words like information literacy, it would do the words information and literacy. Or if you did the phrase search and you put it in quotes, then it would treat it as a phrase. You could do or, and then do the big or there. Same thing, you could do none of these words, and then that was the little dash. Numbers, if you have a need to say a range of numbers, you could do that. I necessarily have not had that. And then in Google, you can also limit by language. I've done this before. If I'm running a search and I notice a lot of sources that I'm getting are not in English and I absolutely need them to be in English, I could do that. You can limit by specific region, so you can also limit by the publication country. Site or domain, I'm going to talk about that in a minute. You can do your terms, so you could say I want these terms only to appear in the URL, or only in the text of the page, or only the title. This really depends on how well this website is coded, but this is an option. You can also tell Google, only bring me back things that have been tagged as free to use, that I can modify, that I can use commercially, or that are free to use to share or modify. That would be for educational use. This is super helpful because if you're ever doing an assignment and you can't, if you're ever doing an assignment and you have to make a PowerPoint presentation or you have to make a video or anything like that, you can make sure that what you're using is allowed by copyright. File type right here, also very, very useful. So say for example, you at some point in your past found a Word document that was like a worksheet or a template or something, and it was perfect, but then you lost it and now you can't find it. You can go and you could put Microsoft Word document and then run the search, and Google will bring you back only things with the DOC. Why is that doing that? Super interesting, but I think I finally got it. And then these would be Word documents because I did the .docx. That is interesting. See, you learn something new even when you're recording the video. Okay, I have a better example for this. Let's just say, for example, I'm doing something on information literacy, and I know I'm looking for a journal article. By this point, I'm hoping you've at least at some point, looked at a database at some point. But if you haven't, take my word for it. You will at some point notice that almost all of these journal articles are PDFs. And that's great. You can save your PDFs, you can edit them and all that. But you should know most of the journal articles you're looking for are PDF. So I could go in here and say information literacy, file type PDF, and then I could do domain.edu. All right, let's see if their advanced search is broken. No, it's not. Okay, that was my string. So, okay, I go into the advanced search. I'm doing PDF right there. and then site or domain, and then I can do .edu. I run the search, and then there we go. What you should notice from this result: A, I'm not getting 6 million results anymore. I'm only getting 134,000, which is great. Nobody will look through the 134,000, but there's fewer results, which is what we would expect, right? Because we're limiting things. We did the phrase search for information literacy. We're telling it only bring us back things from educational websites and only bring us back PDFs. And what you notice here, I'm getting a course information here, but then I'm getting things like from scholarship at East Carolina University. I'm getting some course information. This is probably a syllabus from San Jose State University. I'm getting more information from Northern Kentucky. Some information literacy courses, some articles from Washburn. So if you notice, I can probably just click one of these, and then there you go. Now I'm being brought back an article. And now this might be something I could use for a paper, which I think is pretty cool. This is super helpful if you're looking for pictures. You could do that .jpeg. If you're looking for PDFs, you could do the PDF like I just did, or you can do Word docs or anything like that. As I demonstrated, they sometimes change the way these search strings are done, so you might want to go into the advanced search and run it there. But that's Google kind of in a nutshell. The images are good. I have used these. If you ever do this with information literacy, you might see some of the images we've used in the class. So you can do the image search. I have done the image search quite a good deal. It's very, very useful when you're looking for things. You can do news searches. Again, I use the Google News search quite a bit. You could do video searches, which again I use. You might notice that a lot of these end up being YouTube videos. Google owns YouTube, which is one of those reasons why they're linking to things they know. And then, you could do maps and flights and shopping and all of that. But really, these are the big ones. Books is actually okay. Google Books tend to link you to things that they are going to want you to buy rather than things you can just read. But it's useful because it'll give you a little bit of a basic information. It'll tell you where you can buy the book, and then it'll tell you if it's available in any of the libraries near you. And this one isn't available near me. So, got that going for me. But that's Google, again, in a nutshell. What I want to point out to you is Google Scholar. So, I just throw in a Google Scholar. I'm going to do information literacy, just like I did before. And now I'm getting back results. Interesting fact, I'm getting back more results here than I was on Google. Why do you think that is? Well, I'm not limiting to .edu. I'm also not limiting to just PDFs. So I can have more results here than just those. The way I use Google Scholar is a little different, I think, than most. If I'm using Google Scholar, I'm in a place that I don't really want to log into the library website. I can't log into the library website. And I want things that are a little more accessible. So I usually first limit by time, right? Because most of the time we don't want to cite things that are 10 years old. So I can limit to 2010, and then everything I get back is going to be newer than that. And when I first look at Google Scholar, before I even read the article, I look here first. Because if it says PDF, that means I can access the article. So if, say, for example, I look here .ed or .ed.gov, proposing a meta-literacy model to redefine information literacy. Well, great, I've got access to that. It also tells me that I can star it, which is like saving the article. I can cite it, which we're going to talk more about that in a moment. It tells me who has cited it, which is also extremely useful. And then any kind of related articles. Who cited it is super interesting Because if the higher this number goes, the more credible and the more used this article is. That's a good thing, actually, because it means it's becoming really prominent in that scholarly communication. Um, to access this article, all I got to do is click it. It'll take me to the website where it's located, and then I can download the full PDF. And that's an article. From here, I can save it, I can annotate it, I can do whatever I would like to. And all of that is perfectly above board because this organization has chosen to make this available. So say I read this article and I said, that was great. I want to quote it. I can go down here to these little quotation marks, and then there is my citation. Now, this one, not too bad. Not terribly far off from perfect. But you're always going to want to double check these against the APA style manual. And we have a whole week dedicated to that in a couple weeks. So I'm not going to go too far in depth, but just know Google Scholar can give you the citation. And actually, most of the time, they're not too bad. So that is Google and Google Scholar in a nutshell. Just because we're going to talk about this again in a second. Wikipedia. So I mentioned when I did the Google search, Wikipedia was the first result. I use Wikipedia. Your instructor uses Wikipedia. Everyone uses Wikipedia. Here's the thing. It provides great background research. It provides you with some of the 101 information that you need to write a paper. Remember, I keep talking about when you're going to sit down and write a paper, ask yourself what interests you the most about a topic. Why are you going to care? Well, Wikipedia is one of those places that I go to look and answer that question. Just like 30 years ago, someone would have pulled an encyclopedia off the shelf and sat there and read it and said, okay, that's what I want to do my research on. You can use Wikipedia in that way. You don't want to cite Wikipedia, but you might want to cite the things Wikipedia cites. So, for example, going into Wikipedia, and I type, well, let's look at the homepage. There's the homepage. It's actually a pretty cool homepage. You will get lost on this homepage, I have found, if I spend too much time there. But let's just say I put information literacy in there. I'm going to get quite a large and robust article. And I'm interested in information literacy in higher ed, but this gives me a pretty good high-level overview of all the related topics. It's going to give me a small, this really needs to be fleshed out. Maybe that will be a project for some folks. But it gives me a high-level overview. Wait, why is that in Singapore? Okay, that is interesting. Anyways, remember the first thing we talked about, ACRL, information literacy framework, all of that? Well, if I had an instructor who said, write me a paper on information literacy, this is good information to have right up at the top. And if I will notice, it's giving me some citations. And the first citation here is that framework for information literacy. So what is happening here is Wikipedia is giving me an overview of a topic. It's also giving me some additional sources to go look to for information. This is actually called a tertiary source. It's a third level source. It's directing you to other sources. But it's good to know, right? And these citations here will help your paper improve. This high level overview will help you find what's interesting to you too. So, Wikipedia is not evil. You can use it. You can look up sources. Just don't cite Wikipedia proper. Cite the things Wikipedia cites. On the other hand, these are not good citations. They're not APA citations. I don't really know what style Wikipedia is using. Um, so just know if you use one of these, you're going to have to format it the right way. And I have seen far too many people use one of these citations and just copy and paste it. Don't be that person. You're going to need to reform these and change them how you want. But useful source, useful tertiary source leading you to more sources. Use it. Use Wikipedia. You are absolved from all the guilt ever. All the teachers who have said never use Wikipedia, I hereby absolve you of that guilt, but do not cite Wikipedia. So, with that, that is the end of our presentation. That is, I believe, called Business Kitty as a meme. And no, if you've got any questions, go ahead and send me an email, either in D2L or my personal email, and I'm here for you. This week we have that 10-question quiz. Fairly straightforward, I hope. If you have any questions, let me know. Remember, you can take the quiz as many times as you want, and it is not timed. So, huzzah! All right, everyone, have a great week. Thanks.